Have you ever stopped, really paused, to consider where our most fantastical, legendary monsters come from? You know, the fire-breathing dragons, those colossal, earth-shaking giants. They're just so deeply etched into our myths, our folklore.
They really are.
Yeah.
Part of our collective subconscious almost.
Exactly. It feels so intuitive, doesn't it, that they must have just sprung from pure imagination, like someone just dreamed them up out of thin air.
Right, that's the common assumption.
But what if I told you that the real origin, the genesis of these incredible monstrous myths, lies in something profoundly real, something ancient, hidden for centuries, millennia even, right beneath our feet?
Now you're getting to the heart of it.
Okay, let's truly unpack this then. Could it be that these immense, totally bewildering bones of forgotten prehistoric creatures, the ones people stumbled upon centuries ago, could those bones have actually sparked and, shaped the wildest legends of the Middle Ages and even way beyond?
It's an absolutely compelling connection, and yeah, that's precisely what this deep dive is all about. We're going to journey back, try to strip away our modern scientific lens for a bit.
Put ourselves in their shoes, sort of.
Exactly. To really grasp how those early encounters with massive, mysterious bones, about bones we now know, without a doubt, are dinosaur and ancient mammal fossils. How finding those didn't just make people curious, it actually ignited their imagination.
Ignited is a good word for it.
It really formed the bedrock of folklore about dragons and giants all over the world. We'll explore a time when concepts we take for granted, like extinction or deep time, they just didn't exist.
Right, no framework for that stuff.
None at all. And by deep time, we're talking about the understanding that Earth's history isn't just a few thousand years like many ancient cultures believed. It's billions of years, right? Unfathomable stretches allowing for whole eras of life to come and go long before humans were even around to write things down.
Which is a massive conceptual leap.
Huge. Yeah. And the absence of that concept fundamentally changed how they interpreted these startling discoveries. They weren't just finding interesting rocks. They were unearthing evidence of something monumental, something totally alien to their world.
Something that had to be explained somehow.
Precisely. That had to be woven into their existing worldview, often through the powerful lens of myth, of storytelling. So yeah, by the end of this deep dive, I think you'll never look at a dragon myth or a giant legend quite the same way again.
It's a really profound shift in perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
It completely reframes how you see these iconic figures that have populated our culture for, forever it seems. So let's try and set the scene. Let's step back into a world that's fundamentally different from ours.
Okay.
Picture yourself. Maybe you're an early human walking along a riverbed, or perhaps a medieval farmer just tilling your field, and bang, your plow hits something solid, unyielding.
Something big.
Big. So you dig. And what comes out is this enormous, baffling bone, maybe a femur thicker than your own body, or a skull with these huge, strange openings, unlike any animal you've ever seen, hunted, or even heard stories about.
Nothing familiar at all.
And here's the crucial part, the fundamental challenge they faced. There was no concept, no word for dinosaur. The very ideas of extinction, that whole species could just vanish forever, or evolution, life forms changing over vast ages, or even that immense deep time that allowed for such creatures to exist and then just disappear.
None of that existed in their vocabulary.
Not a bit, no scientific framework. So you're standing there, faced with this colossal alien thing. What would you conclude? How do you even begin to categorize something so immense, so strange, when your whole understanding of the natural world is based on what you see day to day and maybe some old stories passed down?
It's fascinating, isn't it? And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really gets to the profound human impulse to make sense of the world, especially before we had, systematic scientific classification.
Right, before Linnaeus and all that.
Exactly. They didn't have these neat taxonomies. They had myths. They had their own explanations for the unknown, the unexplained. And when you're confronted with something truly extraordinary, like a gigantic, inexplicable bone, well, the human mind just hates a vacuum. It doesn't ignore it.
Can't just brush it aside.
No way. It doesn't dismiss it as just some weird rock. There's an almost primal need to explain it, to fit it into their understanding of how the world works, their cosmology.
So these extraordinary fossils, as the source calls them, they weren't just passively looked at.
Not at all. They weren't just objects of fleeting curiosity. They profoundly fired the imagination, sparking this deep-seated need to synthesize this, frankly, shocking new information into their worldview.
A worldview already filled with spirits and ancient forces, maybe?
Often, yes. deeply imbued with spiritual beliefs, oral traditions, a real sense of powerful, sometimes dangerous, primeval forces at play. They needed a narrative, right? A story big enough, grand enough to contain such monumental, unsettling discoveries.
And so they made one.
They made one, drawing on the knowledge they had, the fears they harbored, and the rich, imaginative traditions available to them. That's how these myths take root.
And what's truly remarkable here, what makes this whole idea even more compelling, is that this wasn't just happening in one place, right? This wasn't some isolated incident.
Not at all. That's a key point.
Our sources highlight that this exact response, this human impulse to create myths around baffling bones, it was happening all over the globe. We see really compelling evidence of these finds and the stories that followed emerging across Europe through huge stretches of Asia, even in parts of Africa.
It's a cross-cultural phenomenon.
So this tells us something pretty profound, doesn't it? It means this wasn't just one lucky hunter in a German forest stumbling on a weird skull, or some lone Greek philosopher finding a giant vertebra.
No, it was much bigger than that.
This was a truly universal human experience. You have these incredibly diverse cultures, separated by vast distances, totally different societies, but they're facing remarkably similar, perplexing discoveries, these huge bones.
And coming up with remarkably similar explanations.
Exactly. Remarkably similar stories started forming about colossal, awe-inspiring, often really terrifying beings. It just speaks to this fundamental human need to understand the unknown, doesn't it? To impose meaning on what seems inexplicable.
And a shared imaginative capacity, too.
Yeah, definitely. An imagination that somehow transcended geography and culture, leading to these universally echoed tales of monsters that, still resonate in our myths today.
It's quite powerful when you look at it globally.
Okay, so building on that global perspective, let's dive into some of the really compelling, tangible links. Let's focus first on European legends, because there are some great examples there.
Right, some very concrete cases.
One of the most famous, one that really brings this theory to life, is the legendary dragon of Klagenfurt in Austria. Have you heard about this one?
Oh yes, the Klagenfurt dragon. A classic example.
It's not just some abstract story from an old book. There's actually a physical monument to this ancient misinterpretation right there in the city square.
Immortalized in stone, literally.
So this deeply ingrained legend of the Klagenfurt dragon, often shown as this terrifying winged scaly beast, was incredibly actually based on the fossilized skull of a woolly rhinoceros.
That's the amazing part, a woolly rhino.
Unearthed in the area around 1335, can you imagine that moment? Medieval locals find this massive, really unusual skull, maybe partly broken or preserved in a weird way.
Big, heavy, strange openings.
Exactly. And in their minds, they don't see the remains of an extinct hairy mammal. No way. They see absolute proof that the legendary monsters from their stories are real.
Irrefutable evidence to them.
They likely interpreted that big central nasal cavity where the rhino's horn would have been as a single terrifying eye socket. Or maybe the hole where it breathed fire or bellowed.
You can see how they'd make that leap, lacking the anatomical knowledge.
Absolutely. This wasn't some abstract idea. It was a physical thing they could touch, and it fit perfectly with the fears and the epic tales already swirling around their society.
It validated their myths.
And the cultural impact. Immense, enduring. They put up this grand statue of the dragon in the city square back in 1590, kind of symbolizing strength or protection. And centuries later, that legend, based on a rhino skull, is still there, still immortalized in stone, a permanent fixture.
It's a fantastic testament to the lasting power of these interpretations. And it raises that really intriguing question, doesn't it? How exactly does a rhinoceros skull transform, in the human mind, into a terrifying dragon?
Yeah, what's the mental process there?
It speaks volumes about our capacity for pattern recognition. We're wired to see patterns, even if those patterns are heavily influenced by, existing fears, preconceived stories about monsters, and just the sheer awe of finding something huge and unknown.
So you find the skull in the 14th century.
Right, and it's clearly not human. It's clearly not from any animal you recognize in the local woods or farmsteads.
Yeah.
No familiar horns, hooves, teeth, and it's big. Your mind desperately tries to make sense of it using the frameworks you already have.
Which are myths and legends, mostly.
Exactly. And the woolly rhino skull, it's robust, it's got heavy brow ridges, and crucially, that very large central hole for the nasal passage and horn attachment. To an eye that doesn't know prehistoric anatomy, especially if maybe the edges were broken,
Yeah.
that gaping central hole could easily look like a single, monstrous eye socket. Or maybe, like you said, a vent for fire. Combine that with sheer size, the ruggedness implying power, you've got the raw material for a terrifying singular beast.
And then you look at things like the medieval bestiaries.
Right. These medieval encyclopedias of animals, both real and mythical, they're often used for moral lessons or just entertainment.
And they described dragons in detail.
Vivid detail, often mentioning things like armored backs and clawed limbs. Now think about what else people might have been finding. Fossilized ribs, maybe with a certain texture or curvature.
Could look like armor plating.
Easily. Or finding large limb bones suggesting powerful claws. These physical bits and pieces provided the proof, the tangible details that let these descriptions solidify in the collective imagination.
So the bestiaries weren't just pure fantasy.
Less pure fantasy, more like imaginative interpretations built on actual physical evidence. People were digging up in their own lands. They were filling in the gaps based on what they found.
And what's particularly striking about those bestiaries, those descriptions, is when you compare them to what we now know about dinosaurs from, modern paleontology.
The similarities can be uncanny.
Some of those descriptions, the armored backs, the clawed limbs, as detailed in medieval European texts, they feel incredibly evocative of how we picture large, land-based, maybe reptilian dinosaurs today.
It's pretty suspicious, isn't it?
It really is an aha moment. The very features they gave these mythical beasts, the strong build, powerful legs, maybe a scaly or armored look, could have been directly informed by the broken, fragmented fossils they were literally finding.
It bridges that gap, doesn't it? Ancient myth and modern science.
In the most unexpected way, it's almost like without any of the right words or scientific concepts, they were describing dinosaurs centuries before the word dinosaur was even invented.
Precisely. It's a powerful testament to just how influential physical observation can be, even if it's limited or misinterpreted through a completely different lens. Those detailed descriptions in the bestiaries, they weren't just plucked from thin air.
They had a source, however misunderstood.
Highly likely, yes. Informed by encounters with actual fossil remains. Imagine a medieval person finding a large vertebra or a section of rib cage from a pretty big dinosaur. The texture, the curve, the sheer size of it.
Yeah, what would you make of that?
It could very easily be seen as part of the armored back of some massive reptilian creature. Or finding a big three-toed footprint fossil. Those exist. Or the fossilized bits of a powerful leg bone with joints you can sort of make out.
Lead straight to clawed limbs.
It could readily lead to that concept. The human mind, when you give it incomplete but really suggestive evidence, it just wants to fill in the blanks. And it often uses familiar archetypes, familiar stories already floating around in the culture.
Like dragons or giant serpents.
Exactly. So if a culture already has a concept of a scary serpent, or a huge lizard, or a winged beast, then finding bones that hint at immense size, a tough exterior, or powerful legs, well, those existing stories become the interpretive lens.
And then it gets written down in the bestiaries.
Right. The descriptions get codified, written down, maybe illustrated, circulated widely. They gain acceptance, solidifying the image of the dragon or other similar monsters. For centuries, it gets deeply embedded in the culture.
It's a beautiful example, really, of how observation, even through a non-scientific filter, can profoundly shape beliefs and art.
Absolutely. Observation meets imagination.
And this whole phenomenon, it definitely wasn't just a European thing. Let's move beyond Europe now, journey further east to ancient Asia, because equally compelling stories popped up there from very similar kinds of discoveries.
Yeah, the pattern repeats itself globally.
Take the Gobi Desert, for instance, a place we now know is one of the richest fossil sites on Earth, just incredible discoveries there. But way back, early explorers, local people, they were constantly unearthing massive bones.
And given the Gobi, we're not just talking small fragments.
Probably not. Potentially large, significant finds, right? Maybe even nearly complete skeletons exposed by the wind and sand over centuries.
Entirely possible.
And what specific stories did these staggering finds fuel? The sources tell us they inspired these enduring tales of griffins and dragons.
Oh yes, griffins too.
So again, you see that incredibly consistent pattern. Find big, unknown bones, and out come the monstrous archetypes. Different cultures, thousands of miles apart, but ending up with remarkably similar mythical creatures.
It's truly compelling, especially when you think about the specific kinds of dinosaur fossils in the Gobi. For ancient people, finding something like a complete protoceratops skeleton.
Okay, what's protoceratops like?
Well, it's got this prominent bony frill sticking out from the back of its skull, a sturdy beak-like mouth, and a pretty robust body. Now, if you see that without any modern biological context,
What would you think?
you could very easily interpret those features as belonging to some kind of hybrid creature, right? Maybe combining bird-like features, the beak, with reptilian or mammalian ones. the body, the frill, maybe looking like rudimentary wings or armor, that could lead straight to the idea of a griffin.
The lion body, eagle head kind of thing.
Or some variation, yeah. A mix-and-match creature born from misinterpreting the parts. And then think about the sheer size of other goby-fine sauropod bones, those long-necked giants. Their massive scales, sometimes elongated, almost serpentine shapes.
Perfect for dragons.
Perfect for powerful, earthbound, maybe even winged dragons. And the desert environment itself, constantly eroding, shifting, revealing these ancient remains. It wouldn't be a super rare event. It might happen often enough to really cement these interpretations into oral tradition, into art, into the region's folklore.
So the land itself was feeding the myths.
In a very real way. Physical reality, misunderstood through that pre-scientific lens, becomes the potent seed for lasting mythology.
And the timeline for this stretches back even further, right? Way before the Middle Ages, or even ancient Asia as we often think of it. Let's go even further back to the classical world. Ancient Greece.
Right, back to the foundations of Western mythology.
Here's a civilization known for its deep philosophy, complex myths, epic poems that we still study. Yet the ancient Greeks also wrote of giants and cyclops, these monumental, often terrifying beings that in their stories existed before humans really took over.
Primordial figures.
And astonishingly, this also seems to have stemmed directly from seeing gigantic fossil skulls. But here's the kicker, the absolute classic misinterpretation that gave us the cyclops.
Single eye.
They mistook nasal cavities for single eye. It's such a perfect example of pareidolia, seeing faces in clouds, shapes in rocks, but here it's on a colossal myth-making scale. It literally shaped their understanding of the world's early chaotic history.
Imagine it. Just imagine the sheer awe, maybe even terror, of a Greek farmer or maybe a philosopher walking along a coastline or exploring a cave and finding a skull maybe twice the size of a human head, or even way bigger.
What kind of skulls would they be finding there?
We're talking about the skulls of extinct megafauna that were common in that region back then. Things like mastodons, mammoths, ancient relatives of elephants. Their bones could be found eroding out of cliffs, in caves, washed up on beaches maybe, or even early whale skulls.
Okay, and the key feature is the nose hole.
Exactly. The most striking feature on these elephant-like skulls, to someone who's never seen an elephant, is the massive central nasal opening, right where the trunk attached. To an untrained eye, that big hole smack in the middle of the forehead.
Looks just like a giant eye socket.
It perfectly resembles a single enormous eye socket. It's almost inevitable then that the monstrous one-eyed cyclops like Polyphemus in Homer's Odyssey would be born from finding one of these skulls.
Wow, so Odysseus blinding the cyclops might have its roots in someone finding a mammoth skull?
It's a very plausible connection. And this interpretation, it didn't just give them a cool monster for their stories. It deeply influenced their worldview.
How so?
It populated their epic poems, their myths, with these primordial one-eyed beings often portrayed as uncivilized, brutishly strong, living in a chaotic, untamed age before the Olympian gods or human heroes brought order.
Representing primal forces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It spoke to their understanding of these powerful, perhaps dangerous primeval forces that could literally surface from the deep earth in the form of these bones. These myths weren't just entertainment, they were their very human way of explaining the massive, baffling evidence of a past world lying just beneath the surface.
It confirmed that giants walked the earth.
It solidified the idea that monstrous beings of immense, often destructive power had existed long before them, and maybe, just maybe, still lurked in remote, unexplored places. It added a layer of ancient terror and wonder to their world.
This whole journey then, through ancient Europe, Asia, classical Greece, it makes it incredibly clear, doesn't it? Even though the actual scientific word dinosaur wouldn't be coined until, what, the 1800s?
1841, Richard Owen?
Right, but medieval artists, writers, even much earlier civilizations, they were undeniably, profoundly inspired by the evidence beneath their feet.
The connection seems undeniable when you look at the breadth of evidence.
And this wasn't some obscure academic thing. It wasn't just a few dusty scrolls. The source material emphasizes that from religious relics carefully placed in chapels to intricate carvings adorning cathedrals, traces of these myths literally litter the medieval world.
They're everywhere in the art and architecture.
It shows just how pervasive this cultural influence was. It wasn't just stories being told. It was manifesting in tangible, physical art, in buildings, even in religious artifacts. These monsters weren't just in people's heads. They were carved into the very fabric of society, seen, revered, or maybe feared every single day.
Indeed, the sheer ubiquity of these images, how common they are in medieval art and architecture, it speaks volumes about how deeply significant they were culturally. These weren't just decorations.
They meant something more.
Oh, absolutely. These monstrous figures often carried complex symbolic weight, religious meanings, profound moral lessons within medieval society. They were far more than just entertainment.
Like dragons representing evil.
Exactly. Dragons could embody evil, chaos, Satan himself, or sometimes they represented the pagan forces that Christianity was battling against. So you'd see images of saints or noble knights bravely vanquishing dragons.
And giants, what about them?
Giants could symbolize something different. Maybe untamed primeval power or destructive pride, hubris, or just the raw, overwhelming forces of nature that people were trying to understand and, eventually control or overcome.
And finding the bones just made it all seem more real.
Precisely. The perceived existence of physical proof, these colossal bones dug from the earth, would only deepen their resonance, cement their perceived reality in people's minds. It wasn't just a thrilling story anymore. It was a warning, maybe a theological lesson, an allegory of good versus evil, or even a foundation myth explaining features of their own local landscape.
So when people saw these carvings on a cathedral,
or a detailed illustration in a beautiful manuscript, they weren't just looking at art. They were engaging with narratives they believe had a real basis in truth, reinforced by the actual evidence of enormous unsettling bones found right there in their world.
that's a huge cultural impact.
Profound and multifaceted. It shaped not just their stories, but their understanding of morality, spirituality, and their very place in the grand scheme of things.
But inevitably, things change. Human understanding grows, knowledge evolves, and there came that moment when science advanced. That must have been a truly pivotal shift in human history.
A massive shift.
Yeah. The source calls it the leap from monster to specimen. That phrase really captures it, doesn't it? Moving away from purely mythological explanations and embracing systematic, evidence-based scientific investigation.
It's a transition from pure awe and maybe fear toward deep curiosity and meticulous classification. Understanding rather than just explaining away.
Was it a sudden leap, though?
Not really sudden, no. It was more of a gradual but ultimately revolutionary shift that actually began long before the word dinosaur was officially coined by Sir Richard Owen in 1841. It was tied to the slow, steady development of entirely new ways of thinking, new scientific disciplines.
Like geology.
Exactly. Geology started to unravel the layers of the Earth's crust and crucially give us the concept of deep time. The idea that the planet wasn't just thousands, but millions, even billions of years old. That was revolutionary. It opened up the possibility for ancient life forms to exist, thrive, and then vanish long before humans.
And anatomy, too, I guess. Understanding the bones themselves.
Absolutely critical. Comparative anatomy provided the tools to actually interpret the bone structures correctly, to tell the difference between a mammal and a reptile, for example, and to figure out how these massive jumbled bones actually fit together to form coherent, extinct organisms.
And then paleontology comes along.
Right. Paleontology emerges as its own dedicated field, bringing rigorous methods for excavating, carefully studying, and classifying these ancient remains. So these scientific advances, they didn't just give new names to old curiosities, they provided whole frameworks, interconnected ideas to understand evolution, the immense history of life, and the undeniable reality of extinction.
So the bones became evidence, not monsters.
Precisely. Evidence of past life, not currently lurking monsters. It fundamentally changed our relationship with the planet's history, moving us from a relatively static, myth-bound view to one that's dynamic, incredibly ancient, and constantly evolving.
And yet, despite all that science, despite knowing now exactly what these bones are, how they fit into the tree of life, that scientific understanding didn't just erase the myths, did it?
Not at all. Far from it.
Instead, these ancient interpretations, born from that earlier lack of scientific context, they seem to have left a permanent mark on global imagination. You still see it everywhere.
Oh, absolutely everywhere.
Blockbuster movies, best-selling fantasy books, huge video games. Dragons and giants aren't just hanging around, they're often central characters. They're thriving in our collective consciousness, showing zero signs of fading away.
And that raises a really important question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even with all the scientific knowledge we have now, why do these ancient myths, born from misidentified bones, persist so powerfully?
Yeah, why do we still love dragons so much?
I think it speaks to something really fundamental about us, about the human condition. Our enduring fascination with the monstrous, the unknown, the primal. Those initial interpretations, often driven by fear, they resonated so deeply because the myths they spawned weren't just placeholders for science.
They tapped into something deeper.
Exactly. They tapped into universal human fears and desires, the fear of the unknown, the raw power of nature, the desire for strength or transcendence, the eternal struggle between chaos and order, good and evil. These themes became deeply embedded in our stories, our art, our language, our archetypes.
So even knowing the science,
Even as we understand the precise paleontological facts behind the fossils, the emotional punch, the narrative power of the dragon as a symbol of overwhelming force, or the giant as a figure of untamed nature or hubris, that power remains potent, undiminished.
it's like science gives us facts, but myth gives us meaning.
That's a great way to put it. Myth provides meaning, connection to our deepest impulses, our anxieties. It's this rich tapestry where human imagination, initially sparked by real-world discoveries, goes beyond the purely factual to create something enduringly powerful, something that still speaks to us on a fundamental level.
So the takeaway here is, next time you hear one of those captivating stories about fire-breathing dragons or titanic giants, or maybe you see some incredible monster movie, just remember this deep dive. Remember that those enthralling tales might not be just pure imagination.
Not entirely, no.
They are, in many cases, likely rooted in something very real. Ancient bones. Echoes from a time when these colossal mysteries were literally emerging from the earth, challenging our ancestors to find ways to explain the truly inexplicable.
And what we've talked about today really highlights how fields we often think of as separate mythology, human history, hard-nosed paleontology, they aren't isolated silos at all.
They're connected.
They are absolutely all intertwined beneath our feet. They inform each other, enrich each other in ways we might never have guessed. It reveals this hidden layer of meaning behind the stories we thought we knew.
So this deep dive hopefully has offered you, the listener, a bit of a shortcut to understanding this really fascinating, often overlooked chapter where actual scientific discovery first bumped up against human storytelling.
Forging legends that, remarkably, still captivate us centuries, even millennia later.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, the final thought to chew on. If these ancient bones gave birth to dragons and giants, prompting our ancestors to weave these vivid, compelling stories to explain what they just couldn't scientifically comprehend, consider this. What other mysteries, what other legends from our distant past might have a similar tangible origin? Something real, perhaps still buried, waiting to be fully uncovered or reinterpreted by modern science.
That's a fascinating question. And building on that, what else might we, right now, be inadvertently misinterpreting or even mythologizing today simply because we lack the full scientific context? Because we don't have the complete picture yet, or maybe we're just not looking through the right lens.
Could we be making our own modern myths based on incomplete data?
It's possible. How does this deep dive encourage you, listening right now, to look at the world differently? Does it make you question the origins of familiar stories, even ones that seem purely made up, or maybe even things that seem totally mundane?
It makes you wonder what's hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. The pursuit of knowledge, it's this ongoing, really exhilarating process, isn't it? Unraveling old mysteries, discovering entirely new ones, always pushing us to see familiar things in a new light, constantly expanding how we understand ourselves and this incredibly ancient world right beneath our feet.